Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, Montgomery County's only public charter school is fighting for its survival. New polling suggests Governor Wes Moore may be losing voter support. County lawmakers are pushing legislation to restrict cooperation with federal immigration enforcement, and growing public opposition to the governor's redistricting plan. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former county council member and founder of SkillSmart, Mike Knapp, and Secretary of the Maryland Republican Party, Mark Uncapher. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. And welcome to 21 This Week. We have a lot to cover this week, so let's just get started. A recent Gonzales poll shows Governor Moore's approval slipping, with voters increasingly concerned about taxes and the cost of living. Mark, lawmakers in the General Assembly are facing a $1.5 billion projected budget. They don't seem to be worried about the cost of living. Isn't this a reflection on the poor job that Governor Moore has done during his first 3 years in office?
Well, the reason we're in this predicament is the increase in spending, where on one side, particularly for the blueprint, and the flat economic growth that we've had for the last couple of years. And as a result, we're having yet another challenge. We certainly had one last year, and we have yet another challenge this year.
So, Mike, I mean, this may seem like normal midterm turbulence, or it might be an early warning sign for the Democrats are headed into going into the next election cycle.
Well, I think it's midterm turbulence. Candidly, I think there's turbulence all over the place. I mean, I think affordability is a significant issue locally, statewide, nationally. I think everyone is trying to come to grips with what that means and how you actually begin to address it. I think Mark is right. We've seen very tepid economic growth in the state of Maryland, and I think that's a real challenge. And I think that I struggle. I appreciate the legislature's focus on wanting to ensure that we're investing in education. It seems to me that we could do this in a little bit more measured approach, which would allow us to be able to take that $1.5 billion and spread that out and be able to do that in a way that accommodates what the realities of our economic situation are, while still making a significant investment in education. And I think we ought to be looking at that. But I think everyone's trying to kind of navigate through very choppy waters right now.
Yeah, so I'll just a little follow up with you, Mike. I mean, it really seems, I see the legislation that's pre-filed and gets filed by the House of Delegates and in the Senate. It seems that they're still being very activist. I mean, so are they going to pass some of this legislation, or is it just really kind of window dressing to show, hey, we're trying to do something, but in the end, they're going to back off because economic realities will set in?
I'll be very curious to see. I mean, we are going into an election year, and as we all know, those aren't usually the years that you're seeing major things getting done. So they are the opportunity for legislators to be able to say, I introduced this, this is important to me, it's important to us, and I expect that that's where a lot of this legislation will end up. I mean, I think if you look at the economic realities, we look at the budget realities, and we just look at the challenges we're being faced with from the federal government, I appreciate the fact there's some activist proposals that have been drafted as legislation. I think it's unlikely that those are going to go forward.
Okay, so Mark, this is the reason we pay you the big bucks to come on to come on the show. With former Governor Larry Hogan announcing that he will not challenge Governor Moore, who can Republicans choose to exploit what may be Governor Moore's vulnerabilities?
Well, a number of candidates have expressed an interest. One is a fascinating one, John Myrick, but also former Democrat Ed Hale has switched over to the Republican Party. Remains to be seen, and there is frankly some others in the legislature have been talked about. Whether they actually run or not remains to be seen. It frequently happens. If you remember, Larry Hogan announced for the Senate on the actual last day of filing. Not that he's going to do it this year. He's indicated he's not running. So it remains to be seen. My point, I think, you referenced the polling numbers now. Wes Moore's are kind of average for governors nationally. They're not dramatically worse, and they're certainly not dramatically better. They really, as Mike mentioned, reflect sort of the general dissatisfaction. When you drill down in those numbers, he does very well with Democrats, and it's really with independents that he has been struggling. Now, it does get him, it does well enough to get above the 50% threshold, but it underscores the fact that he does not resonate with those, middle of the road independent voters.
Well, I thought he was the golden boy, Mark. I mean, I thought, he was going to run for president. So is this going to be a litmus test for his ability to run in 28?
Well, I mean, enough people end up running for president, whether or not they do well, and I sometimes think that doing extremely well in your home state doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be an effective president. It's, I think, more a question of, have you identified a lane or a message that's unique as president? And I don't, if you're asking about his chances for president, I don't think he's really done that. I think he's come across as a more generic Democratic governor and really has not picked out a set of issues that allows him to stand out. One of the areas where he's weakest is on management issues, and that I think will be a challenge for him.
All right. So, Mike, exit question for you: Are Democrats underestimating voter fatigue over spending and taxes?
Candidly, I think the Democratic Party is still struggling to identify what is that path, what is that message that we come together with to be able to say at the national and the state level, to be able to excite people and say, you're frustrated with where we are as a result of the Republican leadership, follow us and here's the way. I think there are a lot of individual, as you talked about, individual legislative elements people are putting out there, but I don't think people have identified a path forward. I think they've identified the discontentment, but I think we're still struggling as a party to say, here's the shining light, let's take this hill.
All right. Well, thank you both. That's a great summary. We've got a few weeks before the filing deadline, so we'll see what shakes out. Let's changing topics for a second. A recent poll from the University of Maryland Baltimore County Institute of Politics did not find strong support for Governor Moore's redistricting plan. It's kind of lukewarm. The UMBC poll asked Marylanders to rank which issue should be low or high priorities for the state government to address, and just 27% said redrawing congressional lines should be high priority. Now, that was from the general public. With Democrats, it was overwhelmingly supported. So the UMBC poll found that only about 45% supported the idea of redistricting, but a whopping 81% polled said they opposed drawing boundaries to favor one party is the major problem for democracy. So, Mike, we had this issue in the last, census. We had, the redistricting map was, went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Are we looking to see something similar if the redistricting commission actually goes forward with their proposals?
I think you have a confluence of a number of different things. One, I think that yes, redistricting is one of probably the biggest challenges that we're facing as a country, because we effectively have now drawn districts all over the entire country where very, very few races are competitive anymore. The other part is it is eminently one of the most political things that ever gets done in this country and has been from the very beginning. And I recognize that people struggle with that, and I do too. There ought to be a better, more objective way to be able to pull that forward. I think as it relates to Maryland in particular, I think those who are looking nationally because of the situation that the president has put us in as a result of what he's forced in Texas, yes, one vote could make a big difference, and I think people are trying to get get back to the House of Representatives. But I think that when people look at it at a state level, it seems like an awful lot of things to try and squeeze to get the juice to make this work, to get to one vote. And does it make sense for us as a state to do that? We only have one Republican representative anyway, and does that get us there? While at a national scale, it could be huge. And so I recognize that there's kind of a disconnect in looking at those pieces as well. And I think you put all those together, and I think that polling data reflects those pieces.
So, Mark, I'm not going to go into, who's, the tit for tat, who caused the mid-cycle redistricting issue. It's kind of ridiculous. But if the Democrats go forward with the proposed map from the Redistricting Commission, isn't there a possibility that they may actually lose a seat, as opposed to gaining a seat?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the challenges in Maryland for them is that Maryland law has a lot more requirements that are specific to our state. So take all those other states, put them aside. And going back to when these particular lines were put in 2022, the Battaglia decision, which, not to get into the details, but in Webb, put in a variety of requirements where the map that had been proposed by the Democrats in the legislature was rejected and it went back to the commission map. There's a real risk for the Democrats this go around that a partisan map would be rejected by the courts, Maryland law, on Maryland law, and either they go back to the old map, or the courts could come up with yet another map that more faithfully follows the various requirements under Maryland law.
So, Mike, I'm giving you the exit question on this. Roughly 4 in 10 Marylanders are either registered as unaffiliated or independent. How do you balance, the opportunity for these people not to be disenfranchised? I mean, that's what it seems like you're bumping into in trying to create just solid Democratic districts. You're disenfranchising not just Republicans, but also the independents.
Well, and I think you're seeing that across the entire country right now. We're disenfranchising, and that's part of the point. People, those in leadership want to have one side or the other, and quite honestly, to have the independents, that becomes the wild card that they can't control, and so that becomes a real challenge there. Because I think, and I wanted to go back to Casey to kind of take exception a little bit, because I don't believe that we're having the redistricting discussion as a tit for tat. If the president had felt he was in a comfortable position and could maintain the House of Representatives, we aren't going down this road. He doesn't feel comfortable that he's going to win those races in a congressional in the midterms, and as a result, he forced Texas down this road. Had he not done that, we're not having these discussions. And it's as simple as that, unfortunately. And then everybody else has had to react to that.
Well, I'm just going to say it's probably because the Democrats didn't think of it before. Because I think a pox on both their parties in this instance. I think this is a bad idea. The Constitution says that after every census, this is done.
Yep.
Not during the mid-cycle.
I agree completely. And had the president not taken us down this road, we wouldn't be here.
All right, we got to go. We're going to look at county issues when we come back from the short break, and that is, should the MCPS superintendent be leading the effort to shut down the county's only charter school, and when does anti-ICE legislation start to harm the local communities? Stay tuned. And welcome back. Montgomery County's only public charter school is facing possible closure, with MCPS citing compliance and special education concerns, which supporters say the school is being targeted unfairly. Mike, this is really a case of first impression. The public record again and the allegations against Mecca Business Learning Institute seem like rather thin gruel, but is it fair to be going after the only charter school that's in the county?
Well, I think it's an interesting challenge in Montgomery County. We are a public school community. We have very strong private schools too, and so there's an alternative for folks who don't want to be in the public school system. But we've long been a community that supports its public schools, and so charter schools, even to get a charter school approved, was significant. And I think the practical reality is that if they're going to be successful, they're going to probably have to be above and beyond any requirement that's been set out for them, or they're always going to be questioned. And I just think that's the nature of where this is Montgomery County. We like our public schools. We've always liked our public schools. We'll continue to like our public schools, and a charter school seems to be kind of the camel's nose under the tent. And so people are going to have higher expectations for them if they're going to move forward.
So, Mark, I'm going to give you the exit question. I mean, the Board of Education has voted to close the school. and the school has said that it's going to appeal that decision. But if the charter school is actually closed, what message does it send to parents who want options outside of the traditional MCPS system?
Well, and this school has been sort of dying from a nick of multiple stabs. This long process has obviously made parents reluctant to go to school. Let's look at Washington, D.C., though, which is half the kids in the public system go to charter schools. There's a very robust process that evaluates the schools. They come and go. And it has a great deal of support there. Again, roughly half the students go to a public charter school and half are in the public school system. And it provides a diversity of educational opportunities that we don't have in Montgomery County.
Well, because this is the decision has been made by the Board of Education, and we're going to wait for the appeal. We'll table the conversation right now, but it's something that we should be concerned about and watch as we go forward. Now let's take a look at what the County Council is up to. Montgomery County Council members Kristen Mink and Will Giwando have introduced legislation to restrict ICE access to county facilities and cooperation with local agencies. Two of the most controversial elements of the proposed Montgomery County legislation go beyond general cooperation issues, however. The first is the bill that would restrict ICE enforcement actions in publicly owned parking garages, and the second would prohibit face coverings or masks worn by ICE agents during operations in the county. And let's focus on the legislation. Mike, we all agree that immigration enforcement is a federal responsibility. Public safety is obviously the obligation of the county. Parking garages are publicly owned facilities, or many of them are, and they're open to everyone. Why are we restricting ICE agents from being able to operate in those facilities?
I think Montgomery County and other jurisdictions are looking at what's happening right now in Minneapolis and what started to happen in Maine, and are saying that it appears as though ICE is operating in a fairly arbitrary and capricious manner, and so how much support do you provide when they're not providing any engagement to be able to say, how do we work together? The Vice President's comments yesterday I thought were ridiculous, that if you guys just act nice to the ICE people, then the ICE people will act nice to you. And I just think that, they're to just keep adding more and more bodies to provide them places for staging area when it's not even clear what they're trying to do or if they even have the authority to do it is, I understand where people's concerns are. And I don't necessarily know that these are the right tools to get there, but I understand that we feel like we have to do something because what else is there?
Well, here's the follow-up to that. The fact is that if you restrict ICE agents from operating in public-owned property, a park or a parking garage, then if they are going to do their jobs, they are going to be forced more and more often to go to the residences of people they suspect of being suitable for deportation. And won't that create even greater controversy and greater chaos in the community?
I'm not sure. Greater chaos they seem to be doing any number of things that allow for that to happen anyway. And so I'm not sure what makes it greater. I mean, they're already going to people's houses and knocking in doors. They're already taking in 5-year-old children and being able to try and draw parents out as a result of having their children. I mean, the chaos that they're creating is kind of fast and furious. And so I think to try to be able to limit the ability for them to do as much of it in a jurisdiction, I understand the intent to try and do that.
Supporters argue that this is about preventing intimidation in places where most people use for daily lives.
Yeah.
But again, the circumstances which limiting enforcement, is there a bright line between enforcement and the violation of federal authority here? I knew I'd choke you up on that question.
Well, I mean, the federal law, there's a long history of localities trying to prevent federal implementation of law. And Casey, I think you're right on. There are lots of ways in which enforcement could be much more enhanced. We have a lot of ID theft, and if there was enforcement on the ID theft, we would be able to have an employer, basically the employer sanctions, the employer check that takes place about immigration status would be a much more effective deterrent, and we wouldn't be having the kind of ICE scenarios that we have in Minnesota. I would encourage my friends in the Democrat Party to embrace some of these solutions that would do a lot more to have enforcement through the employment process rather than having people going to homes and going to parking garages.
So, Mike, undercover officers, gang units, and federal marshals routinely obscure their identity for safety reasons. If the ICE agents are unmasked, and I'm not sure the county council or any county council has the authority to do this. I think it's kind of a clown show on the part of Will Jawando to make this proposal. But if they're harmed, who's responsible?
Well, I mean, I think so the example you put, so gang units, drug interdiction, are a very small subset of most police departments. So the entire police force is not wearing their masks and walking around downtown Silver Spring or downtown Bethesda. Unfortunately, it appears that most of the ICE agents are all wearing masks and walking down because because they all fear for their life. I don't buy that. I just don't. I think they like the autonomy. I think that it allows them, they like the anonymity. And the thing that strikes me as completely ironic is, if it looks where we're drawing many of these people from, if you'd asked them 3 years ago if they would wear a mask because they would protect them from COVID, they would have vehemently been opposed to it, but now they can't get a mask on fast enough.
Well, I think you're dismissing the reality that their families are being threatened by the doxing that's going on. I mean, as soon as you get a picture of one of these guys' face it goes up on the internet, and their families are being threatened. I think it's a little cavalier to say that they should be uncovered.
Well, but it's a little cavalier to be shooting people in streets and in cars as well. I mean, we're getting to a point where this is becoming ridiculous, and so yes, the bright lines we were talking about.
I don't want to get into the shooting in Minnesota because there's a huge difference of opinion as to whether that was justified or not.
But let me come back, Mike. I mean, there are enforcement methodologies that would be much more effective, that would not have this kind of scenario. And in particular, we have, a prohibition against hiring illegals, and we have a process. Unfortunately, it's circumvented by ID theft, which is a crime. If we, for example, allowed for access to the photographs on driver's license, and you could check to do verification on the ID information, we'd have a lot more effective tools. We wouldn't have the violent scenarios, but on the other hand, it would require for people to embrace the fact that the immigration laws need and should be enforced, and including that anti-ID theft impersonation would be critical to being able to accomplish
and
that.
We got about 10 seconds, Mike.
That would have been a great approach for the federal government to sit down and say, we're going to take these measured steps to begin to try to enforce this important law. Instead, what they did was they increased the budget for ICE, and they've trained them poorly. They've cut the training period in half, and they're putting people out on the streets as opposed to doing what you're saying, Mark. Let's actually have a measured approach and actually figure out a good way to do this so we're not impacting communities the way they are in Minneapolis.
Well, you're going to have the last word, Mike, because obviously this is a topic that cuts to the heart of the matter between in our communities, and we'll leave you with the final word. When we come back, parting shots.
Hey world, I have a quick message. It's about safe driving. All right, let's go. Anytime you're driving, have the seatbelt buckled tight, both hands on the wheel and your phone out of sight. When not in your hand trying to text somebody back, because if you do, your car might get smacked. The moral of the story, just put your phone down. The people on the road will stay safe and sound. Put your phone down, put your phone down. People on the road will stay safe and sound. Yeah.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right, because a few hours ago in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign. Not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a fourth ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back. Now with parting shots, Mark Uncapher.
This coming week, Casey, is the first anniversary of the tragic crash in the approach to Reagan Airport that killed 67 people, some on the American airline plane and others in an Army helicopter. This is a time of reflection. Our hearts goes out to those families that were impacted by the crash. And also in the coming week will be a meeting of the NTSB where they will provide sort of final recommendations and final information about the crash.
Thank you, Mark. A nice sentiment. Mike Knapp, your parting shot.
Thank you. We're now approaching the time of year, both in an election cycle and just our annual political cycle, where the legislature is now in session. There's going to be primaries in June, and oftentimes people don't take this opportunity to pay attention to what's happening either in a political perspective or in just our legislative perspective. And I would just urge people to, as you said, look at that legislation, look what people are doing, get to know those candidates who are going to be running for office. Now is the time to do that, because there is time to ask questions and actually get informed so you can understand what people are doing, why they're doing it, and be able to engage from a community perspective to make sure it actually is positively impacting your community.
Thank you, Mike. I want to thank both of you for being here today. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to 21 This Week, Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 This Week, I'm Casey Aiken.